The Fire Emblem series has always experimented with lots of different gameplay mechanics, whether it be the emblems from Fire Emblem Engage or the second-gen units in Fire Emblem Awakening. Each entry in the series aims to try out something new. Even if each new edition does have its flaws, it's cool to see that Intelligent Systems is trying out new things to keep the series interesting. So when the Fire Emblem Fates games were released, we of course were introduced to new features. New features such as personal skills and a more enhanced pair-up system. All the new features that were introduced opened up a lot of customizability for your units, while also still requiring strategy and planning when you think about building your units. I think all the options that Fates gives you for classes and skills makes this game really engaging when it comes to building units. I will admit, the gameplay does have some flaws, however I think Fates has a lot of really fun and interesting mechanics to offer. Before I get started, I want to say that this video obviously isn't a review. I won't be talking about things like the story or the characters or anything like that. I just really enjoy the gameplay of Fire Emblem Fates and thought why not make a video about it. So if you're looking for a review of Fire Emblem Fates, I'm sorry, this video won't be for you. However, if you're curious about what the gameplay is like, or you just want to hear my take on it, feel free to stick around. With all of that out of the way, let's talk about why Fire Emblem Fates gameplay is almost perfect. When you start a new game, you'll be taken to the character creation menu. If you played Awakening, this should all feel familiar. You can design Corrin's appearance, their birthday, and things like that. Then, you'll be asked to pick a boon and a bane for Corrin. Boons and banes basically mean how Corrin's stats will be influenced for stat caps and growth rates. For example, if I give Corrin a speed boon, he will have a higher speed stat and have a higher chance of gaining speed stats when he levels up. On the flip side of that, if Corrin has a magic bane, that means he'll have a lower magic stat and probably won't gain that much magic when he levels up. The boon and bane mechanic was already in Awakening, so it's not like Fire Emblem Fates started this mechanic. However, even if Fates wasn't the first to give us this feature, I think it's really cool that they brought it back. With boons and banes, you can have a lot more control over how Corrin will perform during your playthrough, which can make them one of the best units in your army. In addition to boons and banes, you can also choose a class talent. Whenever you choose a talent, that just means you get to pick another class tree Corrin has access to. Just like boons and banes, this gives you a lot of opportunities to make Corrin a really powerful unit. Not only does Corrin have access to an extra class, they can also pass their class talent to Kana in whichever unit you decide to marry. Similarly to Fire Emblem Awakening, Corrin's child, Kana, will have access to both of their parents' classes. So let's say that Corrin gets married to Rinka. That means Rinka's Oni Savage class tree, plus whatever Corrin's class talent is, will get passed down to Kana, allowing her to change into either of those classes. This gives you lots of wiggle room for your second gens, since they usually will have more class options than their parents. In addition to passing down classes to the child units, you can also pass classes to whoever your units marry. Let's say that Ryoma and Kagero reach an S support with each other. That means Ryoma will have access to the ninja class and Kagero will have access to the Myrmidon class. This adds a new layer of planning whenever you marry your units, and I love that. Like I said in the intro, this game gives you lots of options for customizability. If you want to spend time optimizing who would benefit the most from certain marriages, you can do that. If you want to mess around and make Sakura a magic-based berserker, you can also do that. This game allows you to make some really funny builds, and I think that's something that a lot of players enjoy. Another addition that adds to customizability are the brand new A+ supports. Whenever two units that can't marry each other reach A support, you have the option to make them A+ support to gain access to each other's classes. Just like marriage, this gives you lots of opportunities to gain even better classes for your units. What I like even more about the A+ supports is the fact that those two units aren't locked to each other. Let's say that Takumi and Leo have the option to A+. Just because Takumi can A+ Leo doesn't mean that Leo has to A+ Takumi. This means that Takumi can gain access to Leo's classes, but then that gives Leo the option to A+ with another unit for different classes. If all of this sounds a little complicated and overwhelming, trust me, it can be. All these options for classes is a bit of a double-edged sword. One player might see all these options they have and be very interested in what would work best. However, another player might see all these options and feel overwhelmed and might overthink all of their S and A+ supports. Even if all these options can be a little overwhelming, I think the reclass system in Fates is really well done. The reclass system has some similarities to Three Houses, since any unit could become almost any class. However, you still have to plan out which unit would benefit most from what S or A+ supports. It gives you lots of room for freedom, but still requires critical thinking and resource management, which fits perfectly for a game like Fire Emblem. Another feature that gives you options for customizability are the statues you can build. In your castle, you have the option to build statues of all of your units, and these statues increase certain stat caps for all of your units. Azura's statue increases the magic cap, Kaiden's statue increases the speed cap, just to name a couple of examples. So, if you think speed is an important stat, build all the speed statues. If you want a magic user to have better defense, build all the defense statues. The statues may not be the most important feature in this game, but I think it's really cool that this game gives you the option to modify your unit stats a little bit. This next topic will be kind of short, but I want to gush about all the skills in this game for a little bit. Whenever I play other Fire Emblem games like Awakening or Three Houses, I feel like a lot of the skills aren't very enticing. Don't get me wrong, I think those games do have some good skills, however, I never really felt the need to go out of my way to obtain those skills. But then when I take a look at Fire Emblem Fates, there's so many useful skills that don't even take a lot of effort to get. Skills like Duplicate, Death Blow, Seal Defense, Renewal, and Poison Strike are all really useful and not even that hard to get. I think this gives the player even more reason to interact with the reclass system in Fates. Even if Fates has lots of powerful skills, I think the game does a good job of balancing their effectiveness. For example, Death Blow gives the user plus 20 crit rate when you initiate a battle. Getting plus 20 crit rate is super good. It's a bonus that every player would want. However, you can only use it during the player phase, which means that half the time you don't actually get that bonus. I think this is a good way to balance some extremely powerful skills. This way the skills are still useful, but not too broken. Before I start talking about the weapons, I want to go over some of my favorite skills in this game, just because why not? Replicate is always useful, and I like having it on almost all of my units in my army. The Replicate skill makes an exact copy of that unit, so that means it copies all of their skills and weapons and stats and things like that. I love this skill because you can make a replica of one of your more tanky units like Ryoma or Korin. You could also make a replica of a healer or staff bot like Sakura or Elise. Similarly to most skills in this game, there is something that keeps it from being completely broken. The replica and the main unit share a health bar, meaning that if one loses all HP, so will the other. But that also means if the main unit gets healed, so will the replica. Overall, it's just a really useful skill that's not really wasted on any units, which makes it valuable in my opinion. Warp is another skill that is really useful on support units. Warp allows a unit to teleport next to any of your other units on the map. You're not even locked to certain distance or terrain, you can use it whenever and wherever you want. I found Warp to be an extremely useful skill for Azura, since you'll be able to warp next to an ally, then sing to let them have another action. This skill is also useful for other kinds of units like healers or rally bots. This skill isn't as useful as Replicate since it's a bit more niche, but still really useful with the right unit. The last skill I'll talk about is Poison Strike. This skill is fairly simple. Whenever the skill user initiates combat, the enemy's HP will lower by 20% after the battle. I think this skill is a good way of dealing consistent damage to enemies. Similarly to the other skills I talked about, it can be used for lots of different situations. I found this skill to be useful for setting up easy kills for some of my lower leveled units. It may not be as useful as some other skills, but the consistency and overall usefulness of it makes it a worthwhile skill to me. The last thing I want to talk about for this video are the weapons in Fire Emblem Fates. To my knowledge, Fates was the first game in the series to remove weapon durability. Even though weapons can never break, they do have some nerfs to keep them from being completely overpowered. Bronze weapons can't trigger offensive skills or inflict critical hits. Steel weapons have a harder time being able to double, giving the user -3 speed. And silver weapons can deal a great amount of damage, but reduce the user's strength and skill by 2 for 1 round. I'm honestly not a huge fan of steel and silver weapons in this game, since they seem to punish the player for using them in the first place. However, I do think it's important to keep in mind that in the context of weapons having infinite uses, it makes sense. Since weapons don't break, you have to strategize a bit with what weapon type would be most effective. For me personally, I usually just stick with iron weapons for most of the game. Iron weapons have 0 penalties and are super easy to get in the mid-game, so I usually just stick with those. Moving away from the more basic weapons, I think Fire Emblem Fates has lots of other really cool and useful weapons. One of the first unique weapons that comes to mind for me is Setsuna's Yumi. This weapon may have low might and accuracy, but makes up for that by reducing the enemy's skill, speed, and defense by 4. Every time I replay Fates, I'm always excited to get this weapon just because of how useful it is. Any weapon that reduces stats is super valuable in my eyes, so I'll take as many as I can get. Another weapon that I like to use sometimes is Ryoma's Club. This weapon gives the user -5 speed and only has 55% accuracy, but makes up for that by having 16 might. This to me seems more than fair, since you have to gamble with the hit rate, but deal a massive amount of damage when it actually does hit. If you wanted, you could also use a speed tonic at the start of a battle to help counteract the -5 speed this weapon has. This may not be the best weapon in this game, but I find that the risk versus reward idea this weapon is going for to be really interesting. The last weapon I'll talk about is Saizo's Star. This weapon isn't very strong. It only has 3 might, making it pretty weak compared to others. What makes this weapon useful is the fact that it gives all allies within a 2-tile radius plus 4 strength for 1 turn after combat. I think it's super cool that there's a weapon that serves multiple purposes like that. Similarly to the other shurikens in Fates, Saizo's Star also reduces enemy stats, which means you could set up some easy kills for other units. You can also use this weapon just as a regular rally skill in case your rally bot is too far away. I never really go out of my way to use this weapon, but I do think it is really useful every once in a while. I think we all know Fire Emblem Fates isn't perfect. The story is weak, the characters are one note, and some of the maps could use some work. However, when you look at Fire Emblem Fates purely for its gameplay, it does almost everything right. It has complex unit customization, plenty of useful skills, and lots of interesting weapons. I think Fates took what worked well from other Fire Emblem games and expanded on it, making it feel a lot more technical and interactive. It improved the character customization, the support system, the second-gen units, and lots of other stuff. These enhancements not only give the game more replayability, but also let people have more of a unique experience with Fire Emblem Fates. So even if this game does have flaws, I think the gameplay and its mechanics more than make up for it, making this feel like one of the most engaging and meaningful Fire Emblem games in the series. Alrighty, another video done. Before I do the usual, post video Yap Sesh, I would like to apologize for how long it took to get another video out. I had 3/4 of this video done. I just had to finish the script and finish all the voiceovers, but I'm not gonna lie, I got a little lazy and just kind of didn't feel like working on something. So it took me a while to actually come back and actually finish this. So I do apologize for that. The original idea for this video was to do a regular review. I was going to talk about the characters, the story, the music, all the stuff that I usually do, but as I was writing the script for it, I had felt like I wasn't adding anything new to the conversation. So that's kind of when I got the idea, why not just make a video about the gameplay? Because I feel like Fire Emblem Fates gameplay kind of gets overlooked in a way. It gets overshadowed by the bad story and the somewhat weak characters, so I feel like the gameplay of this game never gets fully appreciated because it does a lot of stuff right. So that's, of course, when I got the idea, why not just talk about the gameplay so I can kind of just gush about how good it is. I'm sure some people will disagree with me, and maybe there's some problems with the gameplay that I just don't see, but as of right now, I think Fire Emblem Fates gameplay is super duper good, and I really wouldn't change all that much about it. With all of that out of the way, I think I'm gonna end things here. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. Hopefully you guys are okay with the fact that I did less of a review and more of a the gameplay of this game is super good and here's why kind of thing. I know it's a little bit different, but I hope you guys liked it. Make sure to like and subscribe. I would really appreciate that if you did it. Hopefully you guys enjoyed the video. I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day. I love you, and I will see you all later.